What is a disturbing fact you wish you could unlearn? Story 1. Rabies. It's exceptionally common, but people just don't run into the animals that carry it often. Skunks especially, and bats. Let me paint you a picture. You go camping and at midday you decide to take a nap in a nice little hammock. While sleeping, a tiny brown bat in the rage stages of infection is fidgeting in broad daylight, uncomfortable and thirsty due to the hydrophobia, and you snort, startling him. He goes into attack mode. Except you're asleep and he's a little brown bat, so weighs around 6 grams. You don't even feel him land on your bare knee, and he starts to bite. His teeth are tiny, hardly enough to even break the skin, but he does manage to give you the equivalent of a tiny scrape that goes completely unnoticed. Rabies does not travel in your blood. In fact, a blood test won't even tell you if you've got it. You wake up none the wiser. If you noticed anything at the bite site at all, you assume you just lightly scraped it on something. The bomb has been lit and your nervous system is the wick. The rabies will multiply along your nervous system, doing virtually no damage and completely undetectable. You literally have no symptoms. It may be 4 days, it may be a year, but the camping trip is most likely long forgotten. Then one day your back starts to ache, or maybe you got a slight headache. At this point, you're already dead. There is no cure. There is no treatment. It has a 100% kill rate. Absorb that. Not a single other virus on this planet has a 100% kill rate. Only rabies. And once you're symptomatic, it's over. You're dead. So what does that look like? Your headache turns into a fever and a general feeling of being unwell. You're fidgety, uncomfortable, and scared. As the virus that has taken its time getting into your brain finds a vast network of nerve endings, it begins to rapidly reproduce, starting at the base of your brain. This is the part of the brain that controls communication between the rest of the brain and body, as well as sleep cycles. Next, you become anxious. You still think you have only a mild fever, but suddenly you find yourself becoming scared, even horrified, and it doesn't occur to you that you don't know why. This is because the rabies is chewing up your amygdala. As your cerebellum becomes hot with the virus, you begin to lose muscle coordination and balance. You think maybe it's a good idea to go to the doctor now, but assuming a doctor is smart enough to even run the test necessary in the few days you have left on the planet, odds are they'll only be able to tell your loved ones what you died of later. You're twitchy, shaking, and scared. You have the normal fear of not knowing what's going on, but with the virus really effing the amygdala, this is amplified 100-fold. It's around this time the hydrophobia starts. You're horribly thirsty, you just want water, but you can't drink. Every time you do, your throat clamps shut and you vomit. This has become a legitimate, active fear of water. You're thirsty, but looking at a glass of water begins to make you gag and shy back in fear. The contradiction is hard for your hot brain to see at this point. By now the doctors will have put you on IVs to keep you hydrated, but even that's futile. You were dead the second you had a headache. You begin hearing things or not hearing at all as your thalamus goes. You taste sounds, you see smells, everything starts feeling like the most horrifying acid trip anyone has ever been on. With your hippocampus long under attack, you're having trouble remembering things, especially family. You're alone, hallucinating, thirsty, confused, and absolutely undeniably terrified. Everything scares the literal crap out of you at this point. These strange people standing around your bed crying, who keep trying to get you to drink something and crying. And it's only been about a week since that little headache that you've completely forgotten. Time means nothing to you anymore. Funny enough, you know how the bat felt when it bit you. Eventually you slip into the dumb rabies phase. Your brain has started the process of shutting down. Too much of it has been turned to liquid virus. Your face droops, you drool. You're all but unaware of what's around you. A sudden noise or light might startle you, but for the most part, it's all you can do to just stare at the ground. You haven't really slept for about 72 hours. Then you pass. Always you pass. And there's not one thing anyone can do for you. Then there's the question of what to do with your body. I mean, sure, burying it might be the right thing to do, but the virus can survive in a corpse for years. You could kill every rabid animal on the planet today, and if 2 years from now some moist, preserved, rotten hunk of a used-to-be brain gets eaten by an animal, it starts all over. So yeah, rabies scares the crap out of me, and it's everywhere. Story 2. Manatees have female organs that are the most anatomically similar to humans. Manatees may also be the inspiration for myths about mermaids, beautiful half-fish women that lured sailors to their deaths. Connecting those dots has been mentally scarring. Story 3. That a dolphin ended itself after falling in love with its handler that used to help it get off. They also lived together in an otherwise normal house that was half flooded on the first floor. Also, this was all part of a project where NASA was giving LSD to dolphins to teach them to speak English. Story 4. Jeffrey Dahmer drilled a hole into some victims' skulls and tried pouring different toxic liquids into the hole. He was trying to make an intercourse slave that could eat and drink but could in no way fight back or escape. The worst fact is that victims might survive the first hole with all brain function intact and live long enough to be fully aware they were going to get a second or third hole drilled. One of the victims managed to escape, the police were called, and somehow the police turned the 14-year-old victim back over to Dahmer. Story 5. Most schizophrenics end themselves during a lucid period. I learned that fact, but I regret the day I understood it. I'm a psychiatrist, MD, and during medical school, I had the privilege of working at an NGBRI building as part of my psych rotation. My very last day, I stayed late to check up on a man with schizophrenia who was generally pretty disorganized. When I was questioning him, he seemed more lucid and he mentioned something about studying literature. Having recently been half an English major in college, I engaged him and he started rhapsodizing about Faulkner, Tennessee Williams, really insightful comments. Then he moved on to music, jazz especially. I spent an hour after my shift with that man, just listening. I passed unattending when I went to write my notes, told him what had happened, awe and joy in my voice. He informed me that the man was a former professor, had 2 PhDs. He said that many people with severe mental illness are living in 1-2 rooms of a mansion, and once in a while the lights come on in the rest of the house, and you can see what it once was. And so can they. Story 6. Parrots often bond with a keeper from their perspective as a lifelong romantic partner. If the person passes or the parrot is displaced, they can go into massive depression and pluck out their own feathers. Story 7. A man named Hisashi Uchi in 1999 suffered immense radiation poisoning after a nuclear accident. In fact, he is known to have taken more radiation poisoning than anyone else in history. Because of this radiation, it messed up his chromosomes as well as his cells and mind system. He was kept alive for 83 days by scientists and doctors. During that time, by day 20, almost all the skin on his body had fallen off, leaving his entire body in constant pain. Later, the skin around his eyes as well as his eyelids also came off, so his eyes were always open even when asleep. His eyes would also sometimes leak blood, making it look like he was crying. His intestines were so messed up that he started to have constant diarrhea, which soon started to have large amounts of blood because his intestines were starting to decay from the inside. On day 53, his heart stopped 3 times, but scientists and doctors were able to restart it. He was basically only kept alive by machines at this point, and the doctors started questioning if it would be more humane to let the man die, as he was in very obvious, unimaginable, indescribable levels of pain and suffering. Some doctors even said that it was torture forcing him to live like this. Due to the radiation, almost all the muscles in his body had been completely destroyed. The only one that wasn't was his heart, which was still being kept alive from the various machines. The worst part of all of this that Uchi was completely conscious throughout all of it, and while he couldn't talk due to the tubes being in his throat to help him breathe as the radiation also destroyed his lungs, he was in obvious pain every time someone touched him, or even while he was just laying on his bed. And while around the 2-month mark, it's unknown if he even felt pain as he stopped reacting to being touched, as well as stopped thriving in agony 24/7. His pupils still shrank when light was shown into them, suggesting brain activity. Hopefully he did stop feeling pain by then, if not, that makes it even worse. His body around day 80 was quite obviously to anyone at this point unsalvageable, and mold was starting to develop on his skinless body. He was even described as a corpse with a beating heart, so they decided that trying to save him wasn't worth it and pulled his plug. All of this and more happened to one man who should have been ended out of mercy for his sake. Hisashi Uchi has probably had the most painful, torturous, slowly agony death of all time. Story 8. There is a phenomenon known as stone baby where a fetus dies and doesn't get absorbed by the body, so it calcifies inside the mother's abdomen. People have been known to carry around these mummified fetuses for 40 years, totally unaware. Story 9. My biology teacher had a Q&A session before Christmas, and one student asked if it's possible to be allergic to your own blood. Unfortunately, you can. Just imagine your own immune system destroying your red blood cells, constant hemorrhaging, constantly feeling cold and out of breath. When we got back from winter break, we saw a new face in class, a former student of my bio teacher who just so happened to have this disease, and we spent the whole class asking questions. I feel so bad for the guy, but thankfully the medicine available to suppress the immune system has made his life bearable. Story 10. Maybe someone had already said this, but the fact that most people don't want to be around when their pets are put down. Vets have stories like 70% of the pets they put down being scared and looking for their humans and not seeing them, and passing afraid and alone. This haunts me. Edit. It's been really lovely to hear from all of the pet owners who've made sure to be there for their pets, and even nicer to hear from the people who are skeptical. Several vets and people who work in vets' offices have said that this isn't their experience, and or that they made sure that they are cuddling and loving pets when owners are not able to be there. So in the end, I'm gonna try to believe that this number is an exaggeration to encourage people to think about and do right by their pets. And it sounds like people really do largely step up. Story 11. Forgive my unscientific terminology, but basically there's a female whale, maybe a blue whale or a sperm whale, I don't remember the species, who was born with some type of genetic defect or physical abnormality, something like that causes her vocalizations to be produced at a different sound frequency than the other whales of her species. Because of this, the other members of her species cannot hear or perceive her vocalizations. So this poor whale has spent her whole life wandering through the world's oceans all alone, trying unsuccessfully to communicate with other whales who basically don't even know she exists. Whale 52, because the frequency is at 52 Hz, which is higher than any of the other whales. I think I read somewhere that others have recently been found that communicate at that frequency. Story 13. In some states in the USA, particularly Nevada, your doctor can basically sell you to a company. If you're a senior with an untrustworthy doctor, they can throw memory loss, hysteria, confusion, etc. on a piece of paper and hand it over to a company. This company can claim guardianship over you without you ever meeting or hearing of them. And they can take you out of your house, sell your house and all of your belongings, put you in a nursing home and have full control over your finances. They can force you to take medication every day for the rest of your life that make you confused and unable to think clearly until you die. They can ban your family from visiting you as well. And it's all 100% legal. Before you even find out it's happened to you, there's already been a court hearing where the judge is persuaded into signing your life into some stranger's hands based on your doctor's false claims. Thank you so much for watching, and please let me know if you like the videos to be shorter or longer. Like the video and subscribe to the channel if you liked it. I'll see you in the next one.